Okay, good morning, and thank you for coming to the Finance Committee meeting of the 28th. We're going to discuss staffing and the IT budget. That's information technology. We will have questions at the end of each presentation. So if you could hold your questions, I'd appreciate it. And we're going to pass it off to Megan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to present some more detailed information about our staffing plan as it relates to the budget this year. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Everyone can see that.
I forgot to mention, this is being recorded for anyone who's attending.
Okay. So we're looking specifically about, I guess we're going to focus on our plan for next year, but at the same time, I wanted to talk a little bit about staffing generally to orient the board or remind the board of all of the services that we provide and staff for in district, as well as the community that may be listening in. So we always think of our services not only to students, but families and the community. I think we touch not just the classroom, but generally everyone in the district has a stake in what we do and how we serve them. So in addition to the people that we serve, we have physical plant locations across the district. Currently, we have 10 schools and 15 total buildings and over 250 acres of land that we maintain from a facility standpoint. So when we talk about operations, that's the human resources behind that that we need to have in place in order to make sure that those facilities are in top shape and well maintained, not only again for our students, but also for our community. And then obviously, first and foremost, our mission is to deliver a high quality educational and co-curricular and extracurricular experiences for our students in both a safe and welcoming environment. So what does that take? I like to highlight some things that when people think about staffing, again, traditionally it's about teachers in the classroom, which are core to our role. But we do have a number of different areas, again, that provide support to not only students and families, but also the community. And these items were touched on, I think, in prior presentations and will be in George's, for example, today. But I think it's helpful to group them to just talk about the range of services. Unlike some other school districts, all of our services are delivered by our employees for the most part. I would say, over between 95 and 98% of our services are delivered by employees that are employed by the school district. So you're not going to see large budget items, for transportation services. Other districts contract that out, nutritional services, even instructional aids. So all of those services are delivered by our personnel that we bring in, that we hire, that we train, so that we believe we can deliver, services at a higher level because of that. So, for example, our nutritional services, in pre-pandemic, I think it's notable that we're serving, over 3,000 meals a day. I think, I want to try to highlight some of the things that we've pivoted on since the pandemic in terms of the delivery. And I would say, it's surprising to me when I thought about the number of meals that have been served since March to families, especially on a free and reduced basis. I should say free basis. Close to 250,000 meals that have been served by our nutritional services department. So again, the outreach is beyond the classroom walls. Health services, there you see in 1920, we're providing services to over 15,000 students, both in public and non-public settings. I think Kimberly Frazier highlighted that in her presentation as well. But in district alone, we're talking about 40,000 visits to the nurses during a school year on average. And now I'd like to highlight that we've pivoted our nursing services, health services have pivoted to attend to all of the needs and functions associated with the pandemic, including leading the implementation of health and safety plans, district-wide and buildings. They have led the rapid testing, and we've been doing that. Thousands, tests have been completed since January, and they're leading our vaccination efforts as well. So in addition to that, now that we have all of our students back, they have the normal nurse visits, as well as all of those other things that they're managing. So it's been a tremendous effort on their part, as it is in a normal school year, but certainly now. Some of the things that I think people, until they have something happen or a situation that involves their children, may not be aware of the types of clinical and counseling services that we're providing to students. Beyond the delivery of or implementation of an individual education plan, our clinical and counseling teams are trained to do suicide and threat assessments, to be key members of our building crisis team, and that crisis is broadly defined. They're part of our achievement teams, providing and connecting families to community-based mental health resources. So again, I want to make sure that people are thinking beyond the traditional classroom in terms of what school districts do for students and families in 2021, in fact. Technology services, I don't want to take all of Georgia's thunder. There's certainly a number of devices we have deployed in the district currently and even pre-pandemic. So, they're a nimble team and have certainly adapted to all of the changes that we've made in delivering services and learning to students both at home, both in a hybrid model. So you can see there that they've certainly had their hands full, including an increase in the help desk tickets, et cetera, that have been connected to our change over to online learning. I mentioned facility management services. I went back a few years. This was part of, sort of in a normal times, we're using our facilities, where our community is using our facilities at a rate of about 10,000 hours per year. So that's not just about someone, playing on our play fields. We are opening doors, we are cleaning up, we are turning lights on, we are making sure the system's operating. So every time someone is on our property, there's something that we need to manage, and that requires people behind the scenes doing that work. And our transportation services, obviously, we've talked a lot about transportation over the years in connection with a lot of different changes and enrollment growth. Certainly, not only like health services, we provide transportation to students that attend our schools, but also transportation to students that are attending non-public schools. And we're running buses over 300 days a year, and beyond just those to school and back. We're transporting students for the purposes of being able to participate in extracurriculars, which we think is a vital part of our program here in the district. Wanted to highlight a little bit about communication services today because they don't get their own finance committee meeting. So I thought it would be helpful to talk about just the delivery of information to the community, trying to make sure that we're keeping the community, parents, and students up to date with what's going on, particularly throughout this pandemic. You can see some data there in terms of the case notifications that we've been sending out. This is a pretty small team that is delivering a pretty important product for the community. Certainly in a time where health and safety is a critical component of what we're focused on. The team under Amy's Buckman's leadership has produced resource pages on the district website where the community can learn more about our equity and anti-racism efforts. Community newsletters are produced out of our communications office. certainly one of the important functions of that office is connecting our community with resources such as the Internet Essentials Program, coordinated a lot of the communication around free meals for students. So really a key component of our team. If we're all doing all of these things, we need to make sure that our community is aware of it and that they're getting access. And by virtue of the numbers that we see of meals delivered, et cetera, we know that's working. So important work that again doesn't always go recognized. So in terms of the numbers, what does it take for us to be able to deliver services at that high of a level? Currently, we have about over 1,500 employees, and that puts us, we believe, is one of the largest employers in Lower Merion Township. It's a combination of professional staff, which that means that they're typically our certificated employees, such as teachers, counselors, school psychologists, et cetera. A little over 800 professional staff, close to 700 support staff, and those individuals, as you know, make it work, keep the engine running. Our school secretaries, our custodians, nutritional services, bus drivers, et cetera, comprise that support staff category, and then our administrative staff range from people that you see in this meeting, as well as our building principals, our supervisors in the facilities department, transportation, et cetera. So that comprises our staff. I should note that our professional and support staff largely are represented by the Lower Merion Education Association. So the personnel costs are largely driven by the terms of that agreement because it's the largest number of employees we have. Our administrative staff is part of what we call an Act 93 agreement, which is the Lower Merion, LMOSA agreement that dictates the salaries and benefits for those staff members. Other employment categories that you see there that are of note include coaches and activity sponsors, which are not always teachers or support staff. Sometimes those are individuals that come in and coach a team for us that we need to manage. And then our temporary seasonal help that typically is summer help, summer work for us. Independent contractors, we have some of those that provide some unique and defined services in the district. We are utilizing a substitute service, which we manage, but those individuals are not considered our employees. So I wanted to make note of that. And then we have a number in non-pandemic years, we have a number of volunteers that also go through some screening process that goes through our Human Resources Office and is facilitated by our Community Services Department. And so in terms of how do we decide what the right level of staffing is, primarily it is formula and need driven. We'll talk a little bit more about what each of those look like as we move through this presentation. But for example, classroom teachers, when we decide we need a new classroom teacher, that's primarily driven by class size guidelines. That being said, we do have situations where we're changing programmatic opportunities for students, enhancements for students at different levels that would require or necessitate additional staffing. And we'll call attention to those as we move forward. Special education staffing is driven by a formula that is set forth at the state level, and we'll look at that. Same with gifted staffing. Our custodian maintenance personnel is driven primarily by square footage and maybe changes to the facility that we have. Certainly having another school come online in a few years will require some additional assessment of those needs. Drivers, driven by the number of buses we have, the number of students that we're transporting, and those routing needs. Instructional and behavioral aids are driven, again, primarily by the individual education plans of students, which again are compliance-driven documents. And finally, technology is a function in part by the number of devices that we're deploying and that need to be maintained across the district. So you can see that these are all factors that we're considering in terms of putting together proposals for increasing or decreasing, depending on the circumstances, staff size. We looked at this. This is the most recent Montgomery County Planning Commission projections, which were done in 2019. So you can see that at this point, we're still in an increasing mode. According to their projections, that being said, we're not sure what the impact will be of the pandemic. We did see a slight decrease over what the projections were for this year. We are also seeing, in terms of new registrations for next year, that they're at a slightly higher pace than normal for this time of year. I believe that we're not going to really see the impact of it next year either. It's going to take a few years for us to really understand what that impact is on enrollment. So we're taking a careful and close look at what that means for our class sizes in elementary for next year. So more to come on that. I talked a little bit about what class size formulas look like in terms of staffing. You can see here, this is just an example of an elementary school. The class size guidelines are up here in the maroon bar. You've got kindergarten. Our traditional class size guidelines are here, 20, 22, 22, 23 across the board. Since I think 2 years ago, the board authorized us to increase that class size by 1. So currently we go in +1 meaning 20 +1. So once we get whatever number of sections to 21, we will add a new class, or depending on the circumstances, we will partner school students. So those two strategies, going to N+1 and utilizing partner schooling, has allowed us to our two strategies that we've implemented to deal with growing enrollment while we're waiting for the new school to be built. And just for the purposes of the audience, the partner school program means that at a certain point in time, we will no longer open new sections in a school, and instead a student will be partner schooled or transported to another school in the district, another elementary school in the district where there is room or space for that student to attend. And that typically, I think we've averaged about, I would say anywhere from 8 to 16 students, depending on the year, that are partner schooled. And we do try to offer an opportunity to return if that opportunity exists. Many have elected to stay in their partner school though, so we're happy about that. Mentioned earlier, special education staffing is driven by some state formula in terms of what those class caseload maximums are. And you can see there's a range from a learning support itinerant student situation where there can be 50 on a caseload down to, autistic support and where there might be only 12 on a caseload. So again, we want to make sure that we're serving all of our students in the way that they need, and the compliance guidelines that we're bound by are ones that do drive the staffing around those needs. This is a graphic or a chart that I think Ms. Frazier had in her presentation earlier. But the point here is, again, that we have about 40% of our students that are that have a specialized plan that will drive a degree of staffing that may be different than what the general education student might be receiving. So again, the point here is just to say that there are formulas and needs that drive our staffing numbers year over year. I think this sometimes is helpful to see. This is let's pretend this is Penn Valley Elementary School. It's pretty close to their population. I counted all of those little people there, so it is actually pretty close. And I also, using the formula, wanted to highlight, within a student population, you have a number of different students that may need services. And it's not to say that they're all in boxes like that. They're not. We have students that those boxes overlap sometimes. And the point here is that these drive additional needs, in terms of making sure that we're addressing our student population in a way that allows them to be successful in school. So not every one of these is formula driven, as I mentioned, but there are they will drive certainly our attention to what's best for students. That slice there is an indicator of the research out there that suggests that students, about half the students in a school in Pennsylvania will suffer some type of trauma at this age level. So this may not be you may not see the student that falls into another category, but is a student that has suffered some type of trauma in their life that needs some support. So this may be, and I'm not, this is not a judgment, maybe a family situation where there's a divorce going on, where there's a sibling that's very ill, that, so at any given time, we have students in our buildings that don't fit into one of these categories that drive an actual staffing number, but we are seeing more and more students that are coming to us that have needs that we believe as a district are important to support, and that means counseling resources, social work resources, et cetera. So I think that's important to note as well in terms of how we try to serve our students and meet their needs as they come to us. This is information. We're turning now to the budget piece, which Vic Orlando shared with you last week, I believe, in terms of the budget presentation. So the salaries and benefits have stayed pretty steady at mid 70% of the total budget expenditures. For next year, you see there what the total salary cost is and the total benefit cost in 21-22. And then this budget number also includes projected new personnel, which we'll take a look at in a minute. Just for reference, you can see over the years, salary increases, again, driven in part by meeting needs of students and also by virtue of the agreements that are in place with our staff. And then benefits, the good news here, I suppose, and there is some good news, I think, is we're seeing there was a slight decrease in our benefits costs projected for next year, and we're hoping that trend will continue, at least in the near future. I highlighted that. So we'll go back to that number again in a minute, but in terms of thinking about the new staff for next year, which is again a cost driver, an increase that drives some of the increase in costs, I should say. We talked about the staffing is primarily formula and need driven. Programmatic enhancements drive some of that. In December, our administrative staff is asked to provide, what they believe their projected needs are for next year. That goes through a vetting process, and I would, approximately less than half of, certainly less than 40%, I should say, of those requests are actually ultimately presented to you. So we do try to think very carefully about those needs, and we try to be as precise as we can as we get closer and closer to the 21-22 school year. So these are our proposed increases across the district in staffing. As you can see, they're divided by professional at the top band, administrative in the middle band, and then at the bottom you see support staff increases. Again, these are driven by, if I start at the top line there, special education at the elementary level, we're seeing newly identified students entering our program. We're projected to receive a number of students who we believe will drive a need for an additional special education teacher at the elementary level. At the middle level, over the years, and obviously in terms of where we are with our devices for students, the platforms that are utilized across the middle schools, we do have support, a higher level of support at the high school for one-to-one technology. And where we are at the middle school, the need is clearly there for a technology integration teacher to support the work across both middle schools. So right now, this would be a shared position between both Welsh Valley and Bala-Cynwyd. At the high school level, you'll see that those staffing requests are primarily driven by, again, some changes to the program of study as well as student selection. So you'll see there a 0.6, for example, for math, 0.4 for social studies. They're driven by needs to cover student demand for programs that we're offering. At the middle level, and probably Mr. Copeland or Dr. McGloin want to talk a little bit more about this, but we're proposing adding or hiring our new middle school principal the second half of this year. So that person can be in a position to help us, do our some of the, I want to say final planning because it'll feel like final planning at that time, but the staffing, a lot of the key pieces that will need to come together during that period of time before we open the middle school. So we want to be able to hire and have that leader in place so that we can move forward with bringing our students into the new middle school. Bob, I see you unmuted.
You did it.
I heard you.
You did good.
Okay, all right. keep moving. At the bottom there, you see a need for an additional part-time custodian to, again, cover our needs for next year, projected need for next year. That position, I believe, is also earmarked to transition and support the new building the following year. Student services, we do have typically, earmarked at least one FTE based on what we could anticipate will be future student needs. So we like to build that into the budget in the event that either by virtue of changing needs or additional needs based on student IEPs that FTE is available for that purpose. This is the same staffing. It's just sort of broken down into those categories that I highlighted earlier. Staffing that's based on compliance needs, staffing that's, there is overlap, but staffing based on enrollment growth and staffing based on the programming that we're offering. So again, this is the same, these are the same staffing numbers that you just saw, but just organized a little bit differently so you can see how they break down into those categories. And finally, just wrapping up with a little bit about our HR department and the scope of what we do in terms of recruiting, hiring, onboarding, compliance responsibilities, benefit management, payroll processing, substitute coordination. We do help coordinate with the volunteer onboarding in terms of background clearances, and then the state and federal reporting obligations. Those are sort of the technical pieces. We like to think that there is the humanity and human resources, and that our team is available to support staff, and certainly throughout this pandemic, we've worked hard to address our staff members who as all of us have had challenges during this time, and meet them where they are, and try to offer opportunities for them to continue to serve students and engage in the work, and support them if they needed time off. So that is a key part of what I think that department delivers, just in this moment, but also in normal times. We have a number of people, fortunately, that apply. I think Lower Merion is a desirable place to work, and for that reason, we do tend to get a number of applicants. Though I will say applicants are down, I think, across the board in terms of it being in the middle of a pandemic, and we're also seeing some shortages, as we've talked about before, from drivers to teachers to substitutes. There has been a decline pre-pandemic that we've noted, and that continues to be a challenge for us. This is a list of basically how we go through the hiring process. I don't, I'm happy if you have some questions to go back to this, but for now, I'll just keep moving. And again, we do a lot of outreach to in these challenging times to try to recruit staff members. We attend hiring fairs, recruitment fairs, which have been, a challenge in the pandemic to do that via Zoom. But we have been doing that, and we continue to encourage candidates to take a look at Lower Merion, and as an employer that offers a good place to work, good benefits, and a very supportive board and community. And so I mentioned the job fairs, and that, I think, concludes this portion of my presentation.
Great. Thank you for that presentation. It was very thorough and provided a lot of information. Does anyone on the board have any questions? Ben?
Thank you, Sue. So I guess Meg and I have two quick questions. Or one, my understanding from enrollment growth issues that people seem to think that all of our kids, our new kids, show up in September. But I think you've said in the past that we can add a kid or two, and our enrollment grows almost 12 months a year. So that is, I know COVID's messed that up, but that is still something you were seeing pre-COVID. So knowing an enrollment at any given moment in time is difficult. Is that a true statement still?
Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of, I don't know that it's more than usual, but we have students that are moving in right now. So we're adding students, weekly to our rosters that are moving into the community as we speak. So it is absolutely a year-round process that we are registering and bringing students in, and just to add to that, we have a short timeline once a family moves into the district and registers with us to bring them into our school. Like, we can't say, oh, well, you can start next year. We have to start them within a 5-day window, basically, to once they've fully registered with us. So
if I might, just a follow up, like, how do we, forgive me, maybe it's an impossible question of how do we know we're going to be staffed right come September? And I don't say that to be mean. It's just so many variables with COVID, people moving in and out. It sounded mean, and it shouldn't have been that mean, but how best can you look at that with the bad cards you've been dealt, trying to project having the right staffing come September?
Well, it's something that I'm looking at, almost daily at this point. So I would be happy to show you my spreadsheet, but it's really messy. So we're looking at it from the standpoint of where are we now? Who are the students that are with us? Because remember, our students in LMBA and LMSB at home are on our rosters. So we include those in our total population count for this year, even though they may not be in the classroom, which is another whole dynamic. Then we're looking at the projections that we have from a couple years ago and seeing like where are the gaps. We knew that some of those projections were off where we thought maybe we're off slightly in one classroom, but we go down to the school and classroom level to look at comparing those two. And at the same time, I have weekly reports of the new registrants for next year. So I can add move the kids up, add the new kids on a daily basis and see how close are we getting to that, number that is projected. So we're working off the projection, assuming that we're going to get those students back, and we are seeing again some of those increases. But again, it's a function of probably getting back to where we were, which was from a staffing standpoint across the elementary was pretty close to where we will be next year. So that's why you didn't see any increases at the elementary level for staffing. And we don't anticipate that there will be any decreases that would drive a staffing change as a result of where we are versus where we'll be in the fall. But it is, there's no crystal ball here, but it is something we're looking at, daily.
It's a worry.
Yeah.
This is dealing with so many unknowns going forward. And you can ask people and even they don't know, the parents and so forth. So it's a worry. It's going to be tricky.
And just to throw into that though, if we determine as a group we need a new teacher, going out to hire a new teacher in August is pretty difficult. There's timing of trying to hire people to have them on board come September.
Yeah, since I've been here, we have really, really tried to get our staffing done in the spring, and get all of our hiring done in the spring, and leaving only August or July or anything like that to something, an unforeseen illness or resignation or something like that, and try to really make sure that we had the people we wanted on board.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. And remember, because of the partner schooling, if we don't, by August, if we've closed a section, we wouldn't add a teacher at that point. We would partner school the student to another building where there is space. Haven't run.
And that's what led to a lot of the summer hiring, was opening up unknown classes. Right. So when you went to partner schooling, you said, okay, then we're going to be done in the spring, and we won't open up classes.
So my last question, I don't know if this will be for Megan or Vic. Megan, you had a slide of benefits are decreased slightly this year from projection. I don't want a full laundry list, but I don't know if there's 1, 2, or 3 highlights as to why such a dramatic shift is. What can you account for that kind of a shift? The big things, not a laundry list. I don't know if there's anything at your fingertips you can share with us as to why that happened.
Vic, do you want?
Sure. The main thing, Ben, was our healthcare costs went down due to the amount of claims. The claims are down, whether it's COVID-related or not, but that claims are what drives our expense for healthcare. And we've been seeing a trend and we've been declining. So that led basically to the deduction in the benefits.
Great. So that's all I had. So Suba, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Suba.
Okay. Peter, do you have any questions?
Thanks. Actually, the benefits one is the one that I was curious about. So if it's driven by claims from last year, there's a chance that the claims for this year will be significantly higher than what we're budgeting for.
Well, the claims actually are based over a 24-month period, which is pre-COVID and post-COVID. There's a formula that they use. Eric Demkin and I, who's our benefits specialist, did talk to them about what the trends have been going forward. they don't see, even with COVID, that there's going to be a spike or anything. I think our claims pretty much have been the last 4 years pretty flat, actually slightly declining, even pre-COVID. So that's what our consultants have told us.
Okay, thanks. So that's great that it's 24 months, so we'll get some smoothing of any spikes there. I was wondering if you could talk a little more, and I don't know whether this would be for Megan. We're adding more social studies teachers than math or English teachers. So I was just curious, I guess, Dr. McWilliam, maybe this is for you. What's the actual program? So that's being driven by the program. I was just curious what social studies programs are being added that we're adding more social studies teachers than the other two subjects.
So sure, in the last few years, we've actually added a few electives that are really driving the need. And so we've added AP Human Geography, that was 3 years ago. Last year, we added Global Citizenship at Lower Merion. We have 5 sections of that next school year. And then this year, we're adding Black Excellence as well. And there's 3 sections between the 2 schools. And so really the driver is what we've added in the last 3 years. That's where the need's coming from.
Okay.
When you add electives, so you would think there's 1,600 kids. 1,600 kids got to be where 1,600 kids got to be, and they're taking something. They're taking less of something else, but they're not taking less of something else in enough numbers to close out the something else.
Right. That's exactly correct.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Can I open it up to the community? Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question about partner schooling. I know that was a great idea in order to help us with staffing, as Mr. Copeland talked about, not having to hire in the summer and whatnot. I was curious if it's working the way we intended it to, if there have been any hiccups, if you found that, any negatives from that.
I don't. I mean, I really think that as a sort of kind of a testament to the success of it is that when we asked if students want to return to what would be their homeschool, they say no. So I think the board, was very cautious about how we went about doing this, and I think thinking about the whole family and options for siblings, and so we've really tried to make sure that when we do this, we're doing it, with, carefully and in a way that, we work with the family so that they understand what's going on and do outreach with the principal. So overall, I think it's been a successful program. It's hard to do because you don't want to have to do that to families, but I think we've, done it in a way that recognizes that they're not giving something up, but they're having to do something different. So, we haven't had a lot of issues with it. Now it's been in place for, what is this, the 6th? I feel like it's been a while. So
a long time.
Yeah. So, and that may change, the need for it. While I think we should still, personally continue having that as an option, the need to have to move students will probably change with the new school coming online. So I would anticipate that the number would go down.
Right. Theoretically, we won't need it, but keep it on the books in case we ever do. I think it's great. It sounds like a great idea.
Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. We'll move on to the IT presentation. George?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, can you see my slide deck?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so like most of the slide decks you've seen, I will kick things off with just a quick review of the department, a snapshot of the department, and then move into the budget. The Information Systems Department has 22 members. We are the desktop technicians, the AV technicians, the database analysts, the web developer that is behind the technology used throughout the district. We are growing and we're constantly growing. We're at nearly 17,000 devices just on our network. So it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon, as we continue to move towards students having devices assigned to them, district K through 12. As you can see, some of the numbers here, our use of Chromebooks continues to grow, as we have now settled on what grade levels, and you'll see this in a later slide as we continue to settle on what grade levels have what devices. And you can see that, again, devices just continue to grow. Some other devices or other services that may not be on our network, such as the projectors, interactive projectors, document cameras. These are all devices that we support as well, that are not on our network. In terms of applications, we're supporting a variety of applications, from iOS applications, Chrome, Mac, PC, online. This is just a quick snapshot of the number of applications we're supporting, broken out over administrative and curricular needs. Help desk tickets this year went up quite a bit. We had a 40% increase in tickets this year. So you can, and this is only for 9 months. So this is from July 1st through March 31st for each year that's shown. So it has been quite a busy year. And most of the time we are most busy at the beginning of school. You can see here this spike in our tickets. This year we went over 4,500 tickets in that window of time when school starts. Again, I can call it a busy year for sure. Hardware repairs have gone up as well. In the previous 2 years, we have nearly surpassed in 9 months what we had repaired in the previous 2 years. You can see that our total repairs, and again, this is to March 31st, nearly surpasses, or it nearly caught up to, I should say, what we had done in 12 months prior to. Again, just to give you a quick snapshot of people that we're supporting, I want to make sure that I point out that our support of parents is growing. This year was certainly had its challenges. When you issue an iPad or a Chromebook to an elementary student, it's the parents who call with the questions. It's the parents who submit the help desk tickets with questions. I think that 40% growth in help desk tickets is it can be rooted in the number of parents that we were supporting this year with remote instruction. Moving on to the budget itself. Some of you are probably familiar with the budget donut. Our budget's actually gone down this year. Our budget's gone down by $40,000 this year. But our spending in, and you'll see it, I'll break out the spending by area. Primarily, we'll look at the instructional computers and one-to-one, and then I'll hit some highlights of the other budget areas. But overall, our budget's gone down slightly this year. Just to give you a visual of where that spending has increased and decreased, as I mentioned, our spending in one-to-one computing has gone up, and our spending in other areas has gone down. Again, I think I started this last year. We broke out security and compliance. Previously, we used to lump those two together. We have broken those two things out to help differentiate the spending for those items. So instructional computing and one-to-one, we're actually going to spend the most this coming year on the middle schools. Our plan is to push the one-to-one, the high school one-to-one down to 8th grade. So 8th grade students will receive the new MacBooks, as well as 9th grade students will receive new MacBooks. But the 8th grade students, when they receive those MacBooks, our plan is to let them keep those MacBooks for the 5 years as opposed to 4 years in the rest of their secondary career. So hopefully next year you're going to see another decline in my budget because our plan is to let students, the 8th grade students, keep those MacBooks for the remainder of their secondary career. We're hoping to get 5 years out of them. So hopefully next year I'll be reporting another decline in the budget. I've been talking a lot about where the devices are. This is just a visual of where the devices are being issued. iPads now are being issued at K1, Chromebooks, really 2 through 7, and then MacBooks 8 through 12. Again, just to break out that spending a little bit more for instructional computers and one-to-one, it's not just the computers that we're budgeting for and purchasing. As you can see, there's other costs like insurance and laptop covers and the cost of the copiers, for example, at the high schools. I mentioned that the middle schools are most spending there this year, and you can see that that's reflected in addition to the Chromebooks, or in addition to the MacBooks, we're also purchasing Chromebooks at the middle schools. Now, the next few slides, next 5 slides or so, are just highlights of other budget areas. I picked out just some items that I thought would be good to explain the budget in this particular area. For example, hardware and software maintenance. We purchase a district-wide Adobe Creative Cloud license that the students and staff have access to. Apple Client Management is the software product that we use to manage all those Macs from the technology side. Many of you will recognize ClassLink, our Power School information system. So this, like I said, I just wanted to show you some highlights of how that money is being spent by different area. Replacement equipment. We do need to replace our virtual servers. I know that sounds like how do you have virtual servers? Well, we actually have a small number, 10 servers that host well over 100 virtual servers. It's a method of maximizing the hardware and reducing the cost of electric and heat. So by virtualizing servers, we're able to better maximize the use and the expense of hardware. Our email archive needs additional storage, redundant storage, and client device repair parts and supplies. And again, highlights in that budget area. As I mentioned, we broke out security from compliance. You can see here some of the costs, and you may recognize some of those costs. For example, I think we're all familiar with spam and phishing. The cost for that, to keep that service in place, you can see there at the bottom. Endpoint protection is antivirus, as an example. Firewall maintenance, again, another example. Continuing on, compliance. We continue to build our compliance for both our websites as well as for closed captioning. And this is the cost of providing those, as well as we're still required to filter web filtering for students in accordance with the Children's Internet Protection Act. And you can see the cost of that filtering. Telecom, internet, and fiber optics. The fiber optic network that connects all the buildings in the district, the 14 locations throughout the district, that's the annual cost for that. Our internet and DDoS mitigation services, as well as our school messenger services. Outsourced services. We're going to bring in summer supplemental staff again to help us get through that busy period of, the budget becomes available July 1st. There's a rush to get purchases for equipment, get that equipment in, get it deployed. And then we have students and teachers coming back, which takes us to that peak that I showed you in the help desk tickets. So to help us get through that very busy period that starts actually with the fiscal year starting through the end of October to beginning of November, we are planning to bring in some supplemental staff. And then you can see some other cost here. For example, Apple support for tier 1 support for problems that may be district-wide with our Apple deployment. Some things here that are budget related and just extra informational. Some of the training that we do, you can see that there's the Pennsylvania Department of Education Annual Data Summit, Blackboard World, Power School University, as well as improving our technology management with the IDLE or IT Information Library training and SANS Institute. In addition to that, external training, we do internal training annually, and that's our procedure and our policy training regarding policies and procedures that are specific to Lower Merion. This is the annual teachable moment for me. This is my opportunity to explain that the network is not just one thing, but it's many things. So there are distinct components of the network, such as the firewall, the core. It's the distribution that actually connects the buildings to the data center, which is located in a DAO. And then the access closets are all those closets that are in the buildings. For example, there's 71 closets that we manage throughout the district that eventually connects those nearly 17,000 end user devices to our network. Why is this important? Because the next slide that I'm going to show you tries to break this out and show you where the spending is going. So this is our 5-year obsolescence plan. There are actually no network expenses next year. We are looking to replace the projectors at Lower Merion. They are the same projectors that have been there since the building opened up 11 years ago. And we do need to upgrade some things in the boardroom. Following year, we need to, as I mentioned, we need to update some switches, distribution layer switches. The video recorders are actually servers in the data center for security cameras. Additional storage, and our phone system back end needs to be updated. The following year, 2023, we anticipate having to replace the wireless network. And then from here out, it gets to be a little bit more crystal ball work as we anticipate what will our expenditures be in 4 years and 5 years. We're anticipating in years 4 and 5 having to replace those access layer switches in the middle schools and the elementary schools as an example, the core layer, which I showed in that previous slide, as well as a firewall and intrusion protection systems. And then again, the crystal ball work gets a little bit greater as we get out to 5 years. And you can see there, again, replacing switches, for example, in the high schools. Questions?
Thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
Are there any questions from the board? Okay, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just curious, maybe this is not a tech question, maybe it's more of a strategy question. I was curious, because of COVID, we went one-to-one all the way down through elementary. You know, you mentioned it in the slides today. Is our intent to keep that, the one-to-one Chromebooks, are we going to keep that long-term, or is that just a temporary thing due to the pandemic?
I believe our intent is to keep the Chromebooks. That's I don't know that we've considered like changing their device to something else.
Well, but I think Peter's question is, are we now a K-12 one-to-one district?
Right. That's really is that or is that just to be determined still?
I would say right now we're going through what I would call a series of what are our COVID keepers? What are the things that we learned this year that we had to learn that we now want to keep. And I would argue that we would keep this as a K-12 one-to-one. Perhaps not. So our high school and our middle school students basically would take the device home with them every night. I don't know that that would be the case for every elementary school. But now I would think if a kid's got a project to do or some work to do, why take the device? Why say that can only be used in school when that might be able to go home and be used there? So to me, that's a COVID key.
Got it. Well, certainly for our district, most of the kids probably do already have a computer at home, but certainly from an equity perspective, it would be helpful to keep. All right, thanks.
Good, Ben?
Thank you. George, I was just curious, when you did your 5-year plan, the numbers bounced a little bit, like is it next year? And I'm just wondering that obviously, 750 down to 350, then back up to almost 700. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with the numbers themselves, but I'm wondering if there's balancing that out would make some more financial sense than that. But I don't know if that question makes sense.
No. It makes a lot of sense, and it's one of the challenges of doing this. It's so we're trying to maximize the life cycle of equipment and still balance the expenditures year to year. So I could pull some things up, for example, to try to balance the budget, but then I wouldn't be maximizing the life cycle of the equipment. So we're constantly trying to balance this, like, what's our life expectancy for that equipment versus when we have the funds to replace it, or when it would make most sense to replace it. So that's a fair question, and it's one that we wrestle with, and it does create that peak and valley in that budget.
Oh,
George, remind me, there was this is like, I can't remember this. I need to up my coverage in, but the law that said that, as processing went up, costs go down.
Are you thinking of Moore's Law?
Moore's Law.
Yeah.
So my question is Moore's Law still working? And if it does, would it have any impact on your long range costs?
I think Moore's Law has leveled out. I don't know that we're seeing that exponential growth in processing year after or I think it was actually every 18 months that Moore's Law predicted that there would be this doubling of processing power, if I'm recalling correctly. That has somewhat leveled out. Unfortunately, it's not that easy to predict. Some equipment, we try to get as much life out of some equipment as possible. Not to get into the weeds, but as an example, if it's a network piece of equipment, and we can have that, we could just replace it with another network piece of equipment and get it ready to go and get it up and running very quickly. We'll stretch that as long as we can. Equipment that's housing unique work, we don't want to stretch it out that far. We don't want to lose anything that's unique to a knowledge worker that we couldn't replace through either a backup or downtime. So it as much as I wish I could use Moore's Law to answer this question, it's not as simple. It's how do we maximize the life cycle? Is it a piece of equipment that we can replace very quickly without losing unique work? And how long is it supported? Is another example.
So thank you. And I got your question, Bob, of in my limited experience that even though as processing goes up, people tend to find more ways to use what's available.
Sure. A flip phone has turned into a smartphone, and now they're well over $1,000 for something that was, but it does a whole lot more. Yeah.
It does, and they eat up bandwidth. The phone call takes up this much bandwidth. Downloading video eats up all that. So George, I'm going to forgive me. I'm going to draw an awful parallel to Jim Lill's world and see.
Sure.
We had to replace a boiler in an elementary school like 2 years ago. Jim Lill had predicted it was supposed to last like 15 years, and it conked out at 12 years. So we got most of the way. So that's my frame of reference. To the extent anything in your world might conk out a year or two early, how would you kind of manage that? I remember Jim had to rearrange his budget, say, I need this boiler. We can't wait another year. I need it this year, not 2 years from now. Are you in a similar, is that a fair parallel to draw to your world?
Yes and no. I mean, so we're always worried about things conking out, and that's why we try to build redundancy or what's called high availability into our purchases. So like, that's why sometimes you'll see us purchase like 2 firewalls, and it's like, well, why do you need 2 firewalls? Well, one's active and one's passive, so that if this suddenly conks out, this one takes over and keeps things running. What is a little bit different in the IT industry is manufacturers will give you support life cycles, and they'll say like, hey, we're going to support this thing until we're going to support this for 7 years. And so they will tell you like, this thing is end of support life cycle this month in this year. So we do have that in our favor that Jim doesn't have. Like I can look at the end of life cycle, end of support announcements from manufacturers and say, we definitely have to replace that this year. In fact, if you think back to the previous F&P meeting, I brought forth a purchase to replace what was called the SRST routers, those telephone survivability routers. We're out of support for those. We've run out of support for those routers. So given that that's a critical piece of equipment, I need to replace that because it's no longer supported by the manufacturer. So I have, for the most part, I have a little bit clearer crystal ball than Jim does in the IT industry.
Great. So that's all my questions. George, thank you. Suba, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I had a quick question on the help desk tickets.
Yeah.
And just to highlight for everyone who's not aware that, do we still do a lot of our repairs ourselves?
We try to do almost all of our repairs ourselves, unless it's some warranty work that we can use. But we try to do almost all of our repair work ourselves because we found out that we could get things back into service faster. The amount of time that we were losing on recovery, boxing, shipping, waiting to get it back. So that's this slide right here, and we try to do as much of our own repair as possible.
Okay, so we have actual like Apple trained technicians, and they can repair Chromebooks and things like that.
That's
as
correct.
Well.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to highlight that.
Certainly.
Are there any questions from the community?
Hey, George, I just had a comment and a question. My comment was in years past, I have heard anecdotally that the Chromebooks really were not robust enough for 8th grade. So I'm really happy to hear that the MacBooks will be used. I think that makes a big difference for them. And then this might be like splitting hairs because in your budget, this is hardly anything, but you'd mentioned $40,000 for insurance. Is that supplemental or something? Because students pay for their own insurance. Is that for staff?
No. So we have to pay it up front, and then we get the money back from the students. So it does come back to the budget. Okay. Not all of it comes back because we don't ask families that qualify for free and reduced lunch to pay. Nor students, I think that I can definitively say we don't ask students that qualify for free and reduced lunch. We
And
do
any
that
equipment,
money.
I assume, that would be required in an IEP would likewise not.
That's where I was going. I didn't want to say that without confirming with Kimberly. I do believe if the laptop is actually required as part of the IEP, they don't pay either.
That makes sense.
I apologize, Kimberly. But that money does come back, but not all of it. But we have to pay it up front.
So that 40,000 includes all insurance, and then some portion of that does not come back. Is that right?
Yes, for the one-to-one.
Got it.
For the high school one-to-one. I think that's what you're.
Right. And I guess for 8th grade next year, they will be paying insurance as well, same as high school.
Yes, we're basically we're extending the procedures that we've used for the high school one-to-one to 8th grade.
Got it.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, this was very informative, and I hope you'll indulge me, George and Megan. I will have some questions that I'll email you after, just nitpicky things on the slides that I want to get correct in my notes. So with that, we're adjourned, and our next meeting, just so you know, is the 12th of May, where we'll be going over, I believe, the curriculum budget. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.